We welcome you on Collegium Civitas podcast. Today we are talking about European sanctions against Russia. I would like to introduce my guests. Artem Koshchienko, definitely one of the best Ukrainian scientists, and Rahim Gambarov, former Minister of Finances in Azerbaijan. Hello, gentlemen.
Good evening. Good evening.
Political and economic weapons against the military machine of Russia and its aggressive and imperial policy, which violates international norms and principles, on its effects, effectiveness and efficiency is still ongoing. Obama and EU leaders consider it very effective. French President Hollande and many other European politicians act not for cancellation, but at least for softening of sanctions. Famous Deputy of Europarlament Jacek Saryusz-Wolski says that EU sanctions are ineffective. He also said, "Why do we make Ukraine less than for Somalia? We must recognize that no one promised military assistance to Ukraine. At the moment, she remained herself against Russian aggression. Apparently, the golden mean is somewhere in between." Mr. Koshchienko, what do you think about that?
For the first time for sanctions against Russia told the United States shortly after the annexation of Crimea. Then President Obama signed an order that allowed to introduce sanctions against those who, from the point of view of Washington, are responsible for the violation in Ukraine. Secretary of State John Kerry also said that if Russia will not support the escalation of the conflict and begins to work with the government of Ukraine, then our partners will have no choice but to join us and apply measures that will isolate Russia in three ways: diplomatic, economic, and international. Just a few days later, the EU imposed visa and economic sanctions against officials who also were involved in the violation of the territorial integrity of Ukraine, and their accounts were frozen. In a week, Angela Merkel announced about economic cooperation with Russia and possible sanctions. In the European press appeared a list of 130 persons. It included Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu, assistants of Putin, leaders of the Federation Council of Russia, if I'm not mistaken, and some State Duma deputies. Recently went a much shorter list. It was only 33 people, most minor and not influential. The list, which was missing leading financiers and businessmen of Putin and his entourage, skeptical was accepted in Ukraine, to be honest, and in many European countries, especially Poland, Lithuania, and Estonia. Most serious for Kremlin was exclusion of Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe and bribery from the Group of Eight. In March, the European Union has prepared three phases of sanctions. First was suspension of talks on Asian visa regime and a new cooperation agreement with Russia. Second, freeze and already visa abolition for Russian officials who were at fault in the annexation of Crimea. And the third, suspension of military cooperation in Europe and Russia, reducing purchases of Russian energy resources, and block accounts of oligarchs close to Putin and companies. And it actually didn't work because Putin trying to spread his aggression more and more. The third phase of the EU dared several months, and through the rest of sanctions, Putin actually did not worry. Many experts considered them rather cosmetic or maybe even warning.
Thank you, Mr. Artem. Mr. Gambarov, as ex-minister, what do you think about economical side of the problem?
I would like to describe the situation after these sanctions. Capital began to flee from Russia, and shares of the leading companies fall in price. but it didn't bring dramatic changes for economy yet, and sanctions haven't stopped Kremlin at home. Moreover, Russian military is still in Ukraine. Instead, the EU and the US were not in a hurry with a third, really painful phase of sanctions against whole sectors of the Russian economy. I would like to remind you that you cannot play chess with a person who is boxing. Over time, the EU froze the gas pipeline project South Stream, which was very important for Russia. At the same time, Russia has started to negotiate with Turkey to replace this project with a new project, the Turkish Stream, through Turkey.
Thank you for your opinion, gentlemen. What do you think? Can this sanction stop Putin or not?
Well, clearly it will not happen anytime soon. And did he stop after Crimea? No. In fact, in summer, after pro-Russian militants destroyed Malaysian Boeing to sectoral sanctions against Russia, joined also European Union, as well as Canada, Japan, and Australia.
Plus, the US imposed restriction on foreign financing major Russian banks. And what? These new sanctions shut down Russian stock market. For example, the oil giant Rosneft. This company has lost 6% of its shares. At, for example, also British Bank, Gazprom Bank, Novatek. I guess the central bank of Russia had to save them.
It's clearly so, and most of the leading world and European politicians argue that Russia has done nothing to cancel the sanctions. Angela Merkel in early January this year said that sanctions against Russia will be cancelled only by full implementation of Minsk agreements. It simultaneously announced that expects cancellation penalties related to the annexation of Crimea, as it will require return of the peninsula.
I agree that economic sanctions on Russian banks and energy companies can be mitigated, but if Russia will adhere to the Minsk agreements, the ceasefire will cease to interfere in EU-Ukraine relations and plus to supply gas to Europe. Instead, the Donald Tusk and Prime Minister of Estonia, Taavi Ruvas, during a joint press conference in early January this year, were for the continuation of sanctions. Tusk he was stressed the importance of unity in Europe. The EU should keep the unity of defending solidarity, freedom and democracy. He said that Europe doesn't compromise on issues fundamental values of the EU and security.
Thank you, gentlemen. Sanctions, despite talks of their weakness, did some damage to Russian economy. But can they achieve their main goal? I mean to compel Putin to peace, encourage him to stop the war, to leave the Crimea? The big question. Do you think so?
Actually, the shifts in the Russian economy and finances have not stopped the Kremlin, and Putin continued militarization of the country, creating new military bases near the borders of the EU. There is a view of politicians and professionals currently that Putin may be even safer than it's now and unleash a full-scale war. But such a radical scenario all the time has a little chance.
Another theory is that the more powerful sanctions may overwhelm the Russian economy. The theory is controversial, but has a right to life. Unfortunately, we are out of time. I would like to thank my guests for being here. That's it for today. Thank you for coming.
Bye.
Thank you, bye.
So